What's up, YouTube? Bringing you a nice little Narukami deck profile. I know I'm not going to be BEO today, but let's get started with a nice little profile that has been seeing a little play in the channel lately. We're just going to show off the deck profile with the ride deck. Pretty simple with ride deck. We have the 0, the 1, the 2, and the 3. The 0 can be any. It doesn't really matter. The 1 has an ability that if it gets written by the grade 2, the grade 1 lets you search the order, which will be this card right here, and it adds it to your hand for free. The grade 2 has an ability that if it gets written by the grade 3 Vermilion, it lets you look at top 7 and add any card that has Narukami in its clan, which is the great majority of the deck, or the order. And then let's get that out of the way. Let's start off with the deck profile. Let's start with the triggers. Let's start off simple. We're going to start off with 4 heals. The heals are just there, you know, generically. Everybody needs to heal eventually. It's going to be beneficial for the game. It's going to be...
No effect heals?
No effect heals.
You don't like effect heals?
Unfortunately, the effect heals don't actually do anything for me. Especially the meta that we basically play. It's hit or miss. Not everybody has extra crit all the time. Not everybody's going to have a restander. Actually, most of the time, restanders are very rare. Even for Dragon Empire, mainly the biggest restanders are decks that are barely ever going to see play. 8 crits. 8 crits are just for the push. Unfortunately, we can't play more than 8 crits. I wish we could. If we did, I would be so much happier.
If we did, everybody would do it.
This is true.
That's why they don't do it.
Yeah.
No effect crits? You don't need effect crits?
In this deck, I don't need the effect crits because I'd rather have it in my hand for shield. The effect crits don't really benefit me because I have enough soul charge as it is. I have about 2 cards that soul charge for me. And then we're going to do with 3 fronts. 3 fronts is just because shield is so prevalent in this game. Shield has been way more prevalent as the game goes on. We just more power creep, less shield value, which is the same issue we had in regular Vanguard before all the reboots. It's always been the shield problem. And then for no surprise, we're using the Dragon Empire OT. It's the best OT in my opinion for Dragon Empire. I know there's the 2 newer ones. One gives you like an additional crit and lets you fetch a card from the drop, and the other one lets you have a restanding rear guard. But unfortunately, I just feel like restanding the Vanguard is way more prevalent, especially because Vermilion has an ability that states for the CB cost, you are able to choose 2 rearguard circles when you attack the Vanguard. So being able to attack more than 2 things is just phenomenal. Especially being able to do it multiple times. So if your opponent has a full board, you can be like swing with Vermilion, bind 2 with the order, and then if you hit the OT, you restand him and you can attack another 2 rear guards on top of the Vanguard.
So he's like given the effect to be able to attack multiple rear guards?
Yeah, as long as he attacks the Vanguard for 1 CB, he gives 2 cards that have Vermilion, sorry, have Narukami.
That's the axe skill.
That's the axe skill.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that when we get there. Let's get these out of the way. Let's go with the grade 1s. 4 PGs. I know most people play 3 and 1 because the Blitz PG comes up a lot. But unfortunately, I don't like the Blitz PG in the current meta because only like 2 decks really benefit off of you using the Blitz PG. Maybe with set 13, Nirvana will gain triple drive, so maybe the Blitz PG will be more beneficial by then. But unfortunately, in this deck, I feel like just because the deck doesn't occur that much hand size, having regular PGs is just way better, especially because it's free if your hand size is already a minimal amount.
DPGs are just good.
Yeah, DPGs is just way too beneficial. We're going to go with the grade 1. This is the grade 1 from the ride deck, Red River Dragoon. His ability is a little interesting. So on top of having, which is phenomenal for a ride line card, because typically ride line cards don't have effects other than by riding. He has a secondary effect that says, when this unit boosts, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard that has Narukami for its clan, you can counterblast 1, and you choose one of your opponent's back row rear guards and bind it. If you cannot bind, you soul charge 2. This is why we don't use the triggers that soul charge, like the crits, because this card lets me, or typically allows me to either get rid of more out of my opponent's back row, or allows me to soul charge 2, which benefits my grade 2s for the long run, because I have a grade 2 that says soul blast 2 to draw a card or bind something. So having more soul just benefits the deck. The best card, in my opinion, the multi-attack aspect that never gets the multi-attack, is going to be our returning star, Rising Phoenix. So good to have.
Which also uses soul.
Which also uses soul. It's not like its G counterpart. It's more like its original counterpart. Its original counterpart was Soul Blast 2 to draw 1 card. If I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've seen it. But this card is really good. It helps with the deck. It gives you boosters if your opponent retires stuff. And on top of that, it lets it kill itself. So it has an act ability where you can retire it to give a unit 5k, which is really good because it doesn't have any restrictions like most of their cards. Most of their cards specify for you to give them like an effect, they have to be Narukami in the clan. But this card, just as long as you get to have it on the board, you can always sack it, give something 5k, which is really good for the long run. On top of that, he has a first auto ability that says when a card is bound, which is very specific. Bound means any. So that means my opponent, or if I buy a card, as long as it's during my turn, I can Soul Blast a card and Superior Call him from the drop, which gives me a lot of utility, especially if I want to multi-attack. Right now, unfortunately, the deck doesn't multi-attack as much as it wants to because it doesn't have the ability to bind during the battle phase as consistent.
It's very dependent on what your opponent has on field.
Yes, especially because Vermilion is typically the one that has to always attack first before you can actually do anything, and you already have a full board. But what's nice is if you don't have boosters and you have this in the drop, as long as your opponent has a board or that you have the order and drop, you can always find a way to get this guy on the board. Best card, in my opinion, is the grade 1. It's just too good. Now, this deck is pretty much build itself, but there is a 5-card slot flexibility, and the 1 card that I play out of the 5-card slot is going to be Gojo. Yes, I know it's not a Narukami card, it is a Kagero card, and for the people out there that know me, they will roast me, and that's fine, because I do not like Kagero. But this card is actually way better in Vermilion than it is in Overlord. So his effect is, as long as the Vanguard attack hits while this card boosts, you countercharge 1. And since Vermilion can attack up to 3 cards, your opponent's not going to guard your rear guards, especially because that's going to rip more cards out of the from the hand. So at the aspects of this card, it's a one-of because in reality, the deck doesn't CB more than 2 a turn at best. So being able to countercharge 1 once in a while is pretty good, especially because I have played a card in this deck that does search for anything in the deck as long as I activate an order. Her name is Latifa, but we'll get to her in a little bit.
Would you consider Gojo a card that you would want to see sometimes, but not all the time?
Yeah, so Gojo, unfortunately, most of the time, I will find it as discard fodder. I know Gojo is a really strong card when you see it, but sometimes the deck, there's more pieces that you really need that Gojo don't suffice. So Gojo is one of those cards that right now has a lot of usage for the time being because we don't have a lot of good boosters and we don't have a lot of good counterchargers. Eventually when we get maybe a generic countercharger, I'll play it, but for the time being, Gojo is very useful. For the grade 2s, we have Thunderstorm Dragoon. This is the other guy that's in the ride deck. He has a secondary effect which is really good on place. So as long as you have him anywhere, so it can be from deck or hand, as long as he's placed on regular circle for the turn, he lets you soul charge 1 and then he gets 5k. But you have to have a Vanguard with Narukami in its clan. So it benefits more for the next card that will show up, but it also benefits you for the Rising Phoenixes, because building soul is very helpful. And sometimes you want to soul charge because you can get pieces that you might need in the drop, like the Rising Phoenixes or the Order in the soul, and then by the effects you can always soul blast them, and then that will increase your playability for the deck. For the second Narukami Grade 2, we have Dragonic Death Scythe. He is also a returning dude, and he's honestly very good in all he does. He's less restricted than he used to be. He still has the same effect that he used to always have, but that's going to be, as long as your opponent's Vanguard has no front row rear guard circles, he will gain an additional 5k. So that's a continuous effect. So if your opponent intercepts, he will gain that extra 5k. If your opponent has nothing on the board, he'll always have that 5k. Unfortunately though, it's only during your turn. So it's, you know, if your opponent swings at it with no rear guards, it's going to be a 10k, it doesn't really matter. His secondary effect is going to be, as long as it attacks and your Vanguard is a grade 3 with Narukami in its clan, you can Soul Blast 2 to bind anything from the board and your opponent's side of the field. So basically, it could be front row or back row, which compared to the grade 1 that only targets back row, this is pretty good. But then it has a simple caveat that if you can't bind anything, you get to draw a card. So it lets you benefit off of the 2 Soul Blasts, because sometimes you can Soul Charge a lot and not use it, and this allows you to use the Soul for something other than just binding, which is drawing. And drawing in this deck, because you don't get to draw a lot in the later game, you get to mainly draw in the early game, you can benefit a lot from the drop power. And then for the second card that is not an Narukami, we're using Drag Ritter Latifa. Drag Ritter Latifa is honestly was meant for this deck. The ability to, if you play a normal order of the turn, you activate this card, you can Soul Blast 1, look at top 5 and superior, call any grade equal to your Vanguard or lower. So typically you're going to activate some grade 3, so you can call anything from the deck. This lets you fetch for anything, which is phenomenal. Like, let's say you have the ability to look for a booster, she can get you a booster, or she can get you the order, because she can also search orders, which for what Vermilion does, searching orders is very beneficial because you can discard them to pin your opponent a damage. But Latifa being able to search anything is phenomenal. And then because of Vermilion, typically you're going to clear boards pretty easily. Latifa, when it attacks, it gets 5k for every open rigor circle that your opponent has in the same column as her. So she can be a 15k or even a 20k by herself, as long as your opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3. Very beneficial for the deck. I can't stress enough how useful it is, because sometimes my hand could not be very useful, and this could get me a secondary attacker or a booster or the Rising Phoenix if I need it. And it's just overall way too good. It's very beneficial. It doesn't hurt to activate it. It does cost soul, but again, you use a lot of soul in the deck, but you also soul charge a lot. So being able to soul charge a lot lets you play this card at the 4 slot, especially because instead of most of the Vermilion's abilities, the Vermilion only gives Vanguard's, units that have Narukami in the clan the 5k. So Latifa being able to be 20k by herself is really beneficial, because Death Scythe can be only a 15k by himself, and Thunderstorm Dragoon can only be 15k when you call him. So very beneficial, very good. For the time being, with the coming sets, I don't see this card being removed from the deck unless we get the promo for Narukami, which is a very good card that allows itself to be bound, which will benefit the deck even more, especially with the Rising Phoenix and the attacks, with the attack patterns.
There's nothing you would add to this deck from set 12? From
set 12, unfortunately, right now, no. There's nothing that really benefits this deck, especially because set 12 is mainly support for decks like Gandiva, Gandiva, Basagara, and a little bit of support for
like one card
for Jiva. Yeah. Let's show off the best card this deck really shows off in very strong energies. It's going to be Eternal Thunderbolt. This card is phenomenal. This card makes the deck. It makes and breaks the deck. The fact that it allows you to activate its effect from the bind zone, as long as your Vanguard is a grade 3. from the drop zone. But at the caveat, it'll bind itself at the end of the turn, at the end of the activation. But it also has a very strong effect where it says continuous on Vanguard Circle. When your opponent were to attack a rearguard and retire it, it gets bound instead. So essentially, because of Vermillion's effect, you're going to be able to CB1, give 2 units 5k, and then on the attack pattern, if you attack any rear guards, you'll remove them, which actually helps your attack patterns if you don't have Rising Phoenixes on the board, or if you have an additional extension, you can call a superior call a Rising Phoenix from the drop because you're binding cards. The second effect that it gives to Vanguard is it's a continuous effect. As long as your opponent has no rear guards, you can give your front row rear guards an additional 5k, which is very good. It helps with attack patterns. I don't have an issue if my opponent hits 2 defensives. If my opponent ever hits 2 defensives, I have the ability to still hit for over 33k thresholds. And you might ask, oh, well, how are you dealing so much damage? It's because of our lovely friend here, Vermilion. So Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion has 2 effects. One of them being an axe skill, which is going to be the axe skill we've been talking about this whole time, which is CB1, choose one of your 2 of your units with Narukami in their clan, and they get 5k until the end of the turn, and then it gains the ability that when this card attacks the Vanguard, you can attack 2 other rearguard circles. It's very important that it says rearguard circles because it gets around resist and stuff. It doesn't target the unit, it targets the circle for in a battle. It doesn't really do any... Like Shoujo Doji. And then it has a very strong second effect, which what makes this deck, in my opinion, very strong. It has an auto ability. At the end of the battle that this card attacked, if you played in normal order, you get to basically discard a card from your hand and pin your opponent a damage as long as they have 4 or less life. It's very good because this is an effect that does not care about your opponent's Vanguard's grade. So if you ride first, you get to pin your opponent a damage. If your opponent hits DOT, you get to pin your opponent a damage. As long as you are activating an order, being able to pin your opponent a damage is just so strong. Very powerful for sure. I think this deck is a pretty good solid contender. I don't know why people don't play it as much.
It's just not popular in standard. It's crazy. Like I don't see this deck like topping anywhere, and it's not a bad deck. Like I'm the main guy he fights. It's not a bad deck at all.
It's pretty strong. It has a lot of versatility. It doesn't have any negatives. The only negative is going to be that there is none. You can even search Persona right off of the grade 2 because the grade 2 has an ability to look for top 7, and you can add any card that has Narukami or Eternal Thunderbolt. You can search free Persona rides. It doesn't cost anything. On top of that, being able to give 5k to 2 units with Narukami is really good, especially for the multi-attack extensions, because you want to give the extra 5k to the rearguard boosters. I know, like I said, it's not possible to do the multi-attack as consistent. Typically it's a 3-attack deck. But because it's a 3-attack deck, most of my attacks are going to be hitting for 33, 38, 43, or 48, depending on Persona, non-Persona. And with Persona, I can hit numbers of 53 with no triggers.
I think I've seen you like hit like 46 on a rearguard column without any triggers.
So it's pretty solid.
What's like its worst matchups, you would say?
Worst matchups, I think, would be things that retire themselves, because if you don't get to bind anything again, you don't really get the benefits of a lot of multi-attack. And then the other thing that would be an issue is decks that can get up their number as well, because again, this deck does not draw a lot, or it doesn't really promote a lot of hand size. And you might say, oh, well, you can fix that with draw triggers. Yes, but draw triggers aren't good shield. They're really bad 10k shields that more often than not what you're drawing is what you're also going to use to guard with that extra draw.
You just can't play draw triggers this format. It's like you go through the deck too fast. Like you need the shield. This format is like everything is just hitting for like insane numbers, and without Persona Ride, people are hitting like 53, 43 without Persona Ride. It's like you just need the 20k shields.
So If I were to fix anything in this deck, if we get that promo, the promo is a card that specifically only helps Narukami. It has 2 abilities that would benefit this deck. One is being if you activate an order the turn of, if that card is in the bind zone, you can superior call it. And it has a secondary effect that says on attack at the end of the battle, CB1, bind the card and you get to draw a card. Binding is very prevalent because since it binds itself, you can superior call a Rising Phoenix and have your booster boost that Rising Phoenix with extra power, especially if you Persona Ride. Because with Persona Ride, you can typically always have an additional 15 to 20k to the front row because of Vermillion's effect and because of the Order's effect.
It would be a more beneficial and more consistent multi-attack engine. Because right now, the only way he can really multi-attack is like if he binds a specific card that his opponent can't just get rid of during the battle, and he would still have to call over a previous rear guard, which isn't always beneficial.
Yeah. But this is my Narukami Dragon Empire deck profile. I hope you enjoy it. Give it a try. I honestly try different cards. I only have 5 card slots because I rather maximize on everything that has Narukami and its clan.
Yeah, you have to maximize on the Narukami cards.
Yeah, because especially everything is searchable by the grade 2, so you want to make sure that you hit something.
But you don't have to play these. You can play whatever.
You can play whatever you want. But if anything, don't be afraid. Try it out. See how you like it. Like, comment, subscribe, and enjoy.
Later, guys.